So we're buying a house in Defiance, and it's gonna be right on the river. Find out it's William C. Holgate's old house, and turns out there's also he wrote a book where he kept a journal, and my father-in-law happened to have it on his bookshelf. So I am going to read this thing called Maumee River 1835 by Louis A. Simmons, A History of Pioneers, Indians, and Land Spectators. Utica, New York to Huntington, Indiana, May 16th to June 24th, 1835. It's the third printing from 1988, published by the Defiance County Historical Society, Defiance, Ohio, 1979. And the back of the book reads Maumee River 1835 takes the reader into the Maumee River area during the 1835 period for a close look at the activity and some of its people. Old soldiers, the last of the Indians, the first white settlers, and the land speculators. Topics treated include the historic Indian, the French and British among them, the opening of the area by General Wayne in 1794, why the Maumee was shunned by those seeking new homes in the West and ignored by the New York shippers, steamboats on the Maumee, Lake Erie, who some of the first settlers were and how the towns were started, land speculators and their ghost towns, the last of the Indians, follow a removal of some to the west, including the Ottawa Indian chief Aquanaxi, who led the last war party among the Maumee. The focus is on 1835 and its people. The scene is the years between the War of 1812 and the coming of the canals, to 1840, with a look back and ahead to place events in their proper perspective. All right, let's do this thing. All right. Louis A. Simonis, Simonis, has a little note to my wife Helen and our six children Gina, Daniel, Anne Marie, Deborah, Nathan, and Jason for their help and understanding during the time spent on this project. Six kids, oh my gosh. Contents, there's a forward introduction. Part 1, Utica, New York to Toledo, Ohio. Part 2, Toledo to Detroit, Michigan territory. Part 3, Toledo to Defiance, Ohio. Part 4, Defiance, Ohio to Fort Wayne, Indiana. Part 5, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Part 6, to Huntington, Indiana. Part 7, Return to Defiance, Ohio. Part 8, The Indians. Part 9, The Holgates, credits and bibliography and index. On the next page, it has a black and white painting. It's by something Smith. And the caption is They showed the way and lost it. And it looks like some white settlers in a canoe, and in the middle standing is an Indian pointing the way down the river. So they must refer to the Indians. They showed the way and lost it. Um, let's see. Some notes to third printing on the next page. Nothing interesting. Picture of a piece of Indian jewelry, saying that it's the actual size. It's probably the size of a 50-cent piece. It was found on the former Charlotte Indian Reservation, Paulding County, Ohio, by David C. Shirley when an old apple orchard site was first plowed, circa 1875. A small fragment of leather thong was still preserved in the silver loop. This handmade example was perhaps made by one of the area's silversmiths for the Indian trade. Next page is a black and white, looks like a painting of William C. Holgate, 1814 to 1888, son of Curtis Holgate. And then the next page is the foreword. The research surrounding the William C. Holgate Journal of 1835 was started in September 1963. At that time, William Curtis Holgate, 1881 to 1965, gave me permission to research and reproduce the journal of his grandfather. Additional copies of certain journal pages were also then made for Mr. Holgate and some of his relatives. In the summer of 1976, accumulated research notes were reviewed and a concentrated effort was started to complete the documentation. With the help of Dilbert L. Latta, representative to Congress, a research grant was awarded in 1978 by the National Endowment for the Humanities. The grant funded part of the final research expense and permitted a more in-depth study. Thousands of documents of the early 1800s, old manuscripts, and published material were examined during this research. The period sources, supported by site visits, interviews, and published histories, were used to annotate and expand upon the Holgate references. My favorite research place, ? Among the old records found in our area courthouses. The original journal, in part reproduced here, and other journals by William C. Holgate, are in the archives of the Defiance College, Defiance, Ohio. They were donated to the college in August 1976 by heirs of William C. Holgate. The next page, captioned Signing of the Greenville Treaty in 1795, as painted by Howard Chandler Christie. Looks like soldiers. Can't tell if it's American or French on the right. Indians on the left. Fort. An American flag, yeah. So it must be Indians and American soldiers signing the Treaty of Greenville in 1795. Introduction. The journalist, William C. Holgate, 1814 to 1888, came to the Maumee River with his father in May 1835, kept a diary on scraps of paper, and in July, upon his return to Utica, New York, transcribed the notes into his journal. Leaving Utica, New York, they traveled by canal boat and stage to Buffalo, New York, by steamboat across Lake Erie to Toledo, Ohio, and along the Maumee River by horseback. They were on a land buying trip and were also checking the land William's father had purchased on one previous trip in 1832. In 1836, William C. Holgate returned to settle in Defiance, Ohio, continued his study of law, being admitted to the bar in 1838. Defiance, at that time, was the county seat of Old Williams Country. In 1841, the county seat was removed to Bryan, Ohio, a more central location. In the winter of 1844 to 45, Holgate went to Columbus, Ohio, with a petition drafted by him for the erection of a new county with Defiance as its seat of justice. By his untiring efforts, Defiance County was created by the legislature in 1845. Amid the most violent opposition, in quotation marks. Holgate maintained a high profile in the progress of early Defiance, Ohio. Through his efforts, railroads came to the town. The present Defiance College, chartered in 1850, would have failed in 1864, except for money Holgate and his associate personally advanced to secure the deed. Over the years, he made many other contributions to the improvement of Defiance City and county. Mr. Holgate was a pioneer lawyer who, through investment in land and banking, became a wealthy man by the time of his death in 1888. The setting. The first men and women who enjoyed the Maumee River could have traced their families back into Asia. The Europeans came next, and a struggle between the Old World and New World consumed a century and a half with alternating periods of war and peace. From Asia across the Bering Strait, on into Alaska, and southward through the Americas came a wandering people some 50,000 years ago. Or was it 100,000 years past? Question mark. The experts do not agree upon a date. In any event, who can comprehend the immensity of such a time span? These Native Americans, or Indians, first drank from the Maumee River some 10,000 years ago. Only they toiled and rested upon its banks until a mere 300 years ago, when a strange new race of people appeared on their lands, Europeans. The East and West had met in the Maumee Valley. The first strangers carried the flag of France. They were in turn followed by bearers of the British flag, and lastly came and stayed the people of the United States. Thus, the area along the Maumee River, located in Ohio and Indiana, long occupied by Native Americans, came under French influence starting in the 1600s and later was dominated by the British, who held actual control for most part until the War of 1812. Following General Wayne's U.S. military campaign against the Indians along the Maumee River in 1794 and the Greenville Treaty of 1795, some settlement was started. Settlement was mostly in the Toledo-Perrysburg area on U.S. reservations within the Indian lands. Through a series of treaties with the Indians, the U.S. gained title to most of the land along the Maumee and started surveys in 1820. With the close of these surveys, legal settlement was permitted only near all of the land along the Maumee River. Permitted on nearly all of the land along the Maumee River. In the early 1830s, towns in southern Ohio and southern Indiana were growing rapidly. To the north, the Detroit, Michigan area was growing and had regular steamboat connections via Lake Erie with the Erie Canal in New York. Between these areas was the Maumee River region, sparsely settled and widely known for its malaria, black swamp, and mosquitoes, which discouraged settlement. In the middle 1830s, the Lake Erie steamboats from Buffalo, New York began regular service to the Maumee River, which provided an outlet for goods through the Erie Canal to New York City. Two other canals were heading toward Lake Erie, which would use the Maumee River as their northern connection. With the completion of these canals, a new waterway from New York to New Orleans would exist. These events, tampered with the success of the Erie Canal and a good national supply of cash, led to a land speculation period in all of the West, including along the Maumee River, which reached its high point between 1834 and 1837. The events following the War of 1812 and prior to the opening of the canals along the Maumee are the focal point of this essay, especially circa 1835. It was a period of dramatic change along the Maumee. The former inhabitants were evicted, the eternal forest was destroyed, and a quickening of the pulse was felt. The first self-powered machine arrived in the form of a steam engine and started a way of life in which the clickety-clack and hum of a motor became an integral part of us. Even the popular music eventually picked up the beat and produces in many a feeling of comfort and orderliness because of its kindredship with the machines around us. The period between 1795 and 1840 ushered in new white settlers and removed the last of the old settlers, the Indians. William Curtis Holgate was part of this scene. I chose to annotate his journal to show the influence of these events on the Maumee River, Holgate's observations, who he met, and what the people were doing. The Holgate Journal provides an avenue by which the entire Maumee region can be viewed briefly. Maumee River 1835 only scratches the surface, but I hope in some way it supplements and helps to pull together the excellent local historical works being produced on various subjects along the river.